Stephen could barely believe it when he dug a barely alive puppy out of the mud on a building site he was tasked to work on. He immediately dropped everything he was doing and rushed the animal to the nearest vet. But when the vet checked the puppy out, he would quickly discover something shocking about the animal. Stephen was just outside in the waiting room with no idea of what had just been discovered in the vet's office. He was just hoping and praying that the puppy would make it through and beating himself up for not finding the animal sooner. When the vet called Stephen back into the office, he was white as a ghost. When Stephen saw this, he immediately feared the worst. Did the puppy not make it? But when he walked into the office and saw the animal sitting on the table, those fears were quickly put to bed. But there was something else. Stephen could barely believe it when looking at the animal, but the vet confirmed what he was seeing. "I'm sorry, Stephen. But what did the vet discover about the puppy? How did it end up buried in the mud, and would the animal make it through this ordeal all right?" But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming stories. Stephen and his crew went out to check out a building site they would be working on in the foreseeable future. It was their first time at the site, so what they planned to do that day was to take pictures of the surrounding construction site. The visit to the building site was important because what they saw was to help them strategize how to go about their work. The building site Stephen and his crew were planning to work on had been bought by their employer. The site had a couple of old houses and an expanse of land on which their employer wanted to erect a big office. On getting to the site, they met the terrain of the building site already cleared. They weren't surprised by this, as they knew some other people had been at the site before them. As they moved further on the site, they found the land they had expected. Since it rained heavily that morning, the land was muddy. From their point of view, it was not ideal for them to be at the site that day. They had no other choice than to do all they had been there to do. If only they knew what they were going to encounter that day. Immediately they saw the land, they kicked into action. They began by taking many pictures of the site's surroundings and terrain. Since the employer wanted them to start construction as soon as possible, they needed enough information to set up the building plans. Their mission at the site that day was simple: they knew they wouldn't be there for long. Not long after they started taking pictures and checking out the terrain, Stephen's attention got diverted. Stephen had been distracted from what they were at the site for because he thought he spotted something moving in the mud. This made him stand aback for a few minutes. Stephen was taken aback because he wasn't sure if what he saw was real or if it was his mind playing games on him. He further doubted what he saw because the crew that had been at the site before were meant to remove everything off the terrain. If the previous crew had done that, no animal should have been left behind on the land. Even though Stephen had doubt in his mind about the slight movement noticed, he concluded that the movement was undeniable. Based on his conclusion, he slowly approached the place he saw a strange movement. All the while, his crew had no idea what was happening with Stephen, as they were focused on why they were at the site. On getting to the spot he had sighted a movement, Stephen pushed a little mud aside. In shock, he almost jumped back when he saw that there was truly something under the mud. A few minutes after his realization, he got calm and took steps to have a closer look at what the thing was. After looking closely, he found that the thing was an animal that looked like a puppy. When he confirmed the thing was a puppy, Stephen started digging as fast as he could to get the barely moving puppy out of the mud. As Stephen was trying to get the puppy out, he couldn't help but wonder how the puppy could have ended up in the situation. While the other crew members were almost done with checking the terrain, it occurred to them that Stephen was not with them. Without much thought, they felt something was going on. Immediately, they made their way to where Stephen was. They were all shocked by what he had pulled out of the ground. It became obvious to them that the puppy was in bad shape. Hard chunks of mud completely covered the puppy. The covering was so much and hard that it was impossible for them to wipe it off without causing the animal pain or leaving scratches on its body. Based on the condition of the animal, they concluded that it must have been where it was found for a while. This conclusion made some crew members wonder if the previous crew had accidentally buried the animal when clearing the terrain. On the other hand, others felt it was done on purpose. Whatever the case was, Stephen was sure of one thing. He was sure the puppy needed to be taken to a vet immediately. Stephen was of the opinion that if the animal had been in the mud for some days, the covering of mud was the least of the puppy's problems. Instead, he speculated the animal would have a number of things that are wrong with it. After much deliberation on what next to do, the crew went on to conclude the job on their hands. Since Stephen wanted to personally take the puppy to the nearest vet, he left his crew members at the site. Before leaving the site, he called a vet to report that he was coming with an emergency. Thankfully, the nearby vet was only 15 minutes' drive from where they were working. Due to his concern for the puppy, his journey to the vet took about 10 minutes. He wanted the puppy to get help as soon as possible since he didn't know how long it had left. Also, it seemed to him that the animal was getting weaker as time passed. On getting to the vet clinic, an employee was already waiting for him outside. The employee was waiting to help him with the puppy. Upon arrival, the employee at the vet clinic informed him that the vet on call was still busy finalizing an operation, but it was nothing to worry about, as Stephen would be attended to right after the vet was done. The employee took Stephen and the puppy into another room to wait for the vet to be done. While they waited, the employee took the initiative to run some checks on the puppy. She did this because it was an emergency case and Stephen was getting anxious about the need to wait for the vet. The staff started the check by trying to get the puppy to drink, but the puppy seemed uninterested in doing that. The puppy's action came off as a bad sign to the woman. As a result, she ended up putting the animal on an IV so as to get some fluid and food into the animal. At the same time, she started to gently try to clean up the animal a bit with some warm water and a cloth. The process of cleaning up the animal was slow. This was because the puppy was often crying in pain as the cleaning process took place. As the cleaning process continued and a little mud covering was removed, the woman noticed the puppy looked a bit strange. She couldn't conclude what was off about the animal as it was still very dirty by the time the doctor called Stephen in. While the IV was still attached to the puppy, the animal was rolled to the vet's office. Immediately, the vet began taking the animal's vitals. He also ran some checks on the animal to know how serious the situation he was handling was. With proper knowledge of the situation, he would be able to help the animal as quickly as possible. When the vet was sure the animal would make it through, he started to take of some of the mud and found out that he was not dealing with a puppy at all, but with a fox. When it was nursed back to full health, he was handed over to the wildlife center and returned to nature. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable tale like this one.